Welcome to our Lunch and Learn. My name is Joanne Vieweg, and I'm the president of the Board of Directors of the Red River Valley Asperger Autism Network. The Red River Valley Asperger Autism Network is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to empower, support, educate about, and advocate for persons on the autism spectrum and their families. The format today is a brief overview of the topic, followed by a question and answer session. We're privileged today to have on our panel adults with Asperger's syndrome, professionals, and parents. So I think I'll ask the panelists to introduce themselves today. Would you go ahead and start? John, maybe you can start?
Sure. Do I stand up?
Whichever you're comfortable with.
Okay. Hello, my name is John Fody. I am on the autistic spectrum. I have Asperger's syndrome. I am a professional public speaker. I am on the Speakers Bureau here. I am the video editor, and it is my personal mission and goal to educate, help people better understand, and help as many people as I can understanding and work through learning about autism and Asperger's. Is there anything else?
That's wonderful. Thank you.
I'm Sylvia DeCray, and I work for the Fargo Public Schools. And I work with teams with teachers and parents that have kids that have autism. And so I try to do kind of the same things that John is talking about in team meetings.
I'm Chris McEwen. I'm on the Board of Directors for River Valley Asperger Autism Network. I'm on the autism spectrum. For career stuff, I work as a director of research for a startup marketing firm, and I'm also finishing my master's degree at NDSU.
Thank you very much. Our topic today is teaching executive function skills. We've had this topic presented a few times in the past, and it's always been very well received, and there's a lot of interest in it because this is a very broad category. In short, executive function skills is an umbrella term used to describe particular types of cognitive functioning. It's the functioning that happens in the frontal lobe of our brains, helps us be organized, solve problems, anticipate what may be coming next, planning, those kinds of really important skills. You might call it like the CEO of our brain or the conductor of the orchestra. There are a number of them, as I was describing, and they also cue other mental abilities on what to do next. When an executive functioning skill breaks down, behavior becomes poorly controlled. This is often the time when we'll see something like what we call meltdowns, which people who are unfamiliar with people on the autism spectrum refer to as temper tantrums. They're different, it's not the same thing. But dysregulated behavior may often show up as a meltdown. Ross Green is a really good reference when we're talking about executive function skills. He's written a book called Lost at School. And his whole premise is that behind every challenging behavior we come across, there is some kind of an unsolved problem or a skill that is lagging, that the person just hasn't learned yet to deal with that particular skill. It often occurs when the demand on the person exceeds what they know how to do in order how to adapt to that appropriately. To deal with this, he recommends that we figure out what that skill is that's not there and figure out a way to teach it. This speaks to my heart because I am a retired teacher and school counselor, and I like to look at most every event in life as a learning opportunity. Particularly in schools, that's what we're all about. At home, that's what we do. We're teaching our children and our young adults to be prepared, to be an adult, and to be successful in the world. So if we look at these challenging behaviors in terms of a learning opportunity, it can kind of help us shift how we're thinking about it. The best way to start with this is to figure out what was the antecedent. What happened right before this? And one thing that I've learned from our adult advisors is that it may not be just that immediate thing that happened just before. It might be an accumulation of like maybe 12 things have happened through the day that this person has dealt with. And their capacity to adapt and handle that is like up to here. And so the one little thing, it's like the straw that broke the camel's back. So that particular thing may not be the exact reason, but it was the triggering. I see you're nodding about that. Like, this sounds real familiar.
Totally.
Yeah. And so what I would do in a situation like that was I'd look like and say, oh gosh, this must have been a really stressful day. So what was it about the day in general that caused that amount of stress in terms of trying to figure out then how to deal with that? And we're going to be open to questions and comments and about that as we go on. It's really important too, not to just deal with the person, but to engage in a mutual problem solving. I noticed today that it was really hard for you to get out of the car to go to the dentist. What do you think that was about? And then get in and figure out what the problem solving, what the problem was, and then together work out some strategies to try the next time, so that it's a mutually agreed upon thing. Now granted, if you've got a 5-year-old, you might not be able to get too involved in it, but they can just recognizing, the child even at 5 will recognize that you're paying attention, noticing that something was hard, and that you want to help them out. So you're going to guide them in a little bit different way than you would an older kid, but it's the same premise works. This is just a quick outline of what we're going to talk about today, because as I said before, there's a lot of things in this category. We're going to look at problem solving and strategies. We're going to look at organizational skills and potential strategies for helping that, as well as dealing with transitions. Now, when we're looking at problem solving, we're talking about impulse control, not running out to the street as soon as you see the ball run out there. You know, that's, or blurting out something in the middle of class instead of waiting your turn. We see this, you see that in a lot of kids when they're younger. They learn not to do that. Well, a lot of our kids, because impulse control, it has not developed well for them yet, you'll see that lasting longer maybe for them. And sometimes that gets, as a teacher, you get impatient with that. You know, you should know how to do this. We've been talking about this a long time. But if you understand that that comes from that lack of skill in that particular area, it helps kind of relate to that. Emotional regulation, which is not how quickly someone would get angry or get tearful or upset about something. Frustration management, and then learning to monitor one's own reactions to things. Now, as we list these are kind of grown-up things, aren't they? I mean, that's a lot to ask a little child. So we learn these as we grow up. And our kids really need very specific teaching to help them focus on how to do these things. Some of the strategies that tend to work is, the first thing is to slow down that reaction. Help them learn to stop and think. In our schools, we have things like the red light, yellow light, green light. I don't know if they use that right now in many of the schools, but we did. In other words, you have to stop, think, and then plan about what you're going to do. There's lots of different ways to approach this. And then teaching the person, not just a child, common strategies. What has worked for you in the past? With my 16-year-old grandson, he's getting better at this. But I often have to remind him, because when he's distressed, that reasoning goes out the window. Just think about any of us. When you're angry or upset about something, do you have your best problem-solving skills at your fingertips? Probably not. I was kicking myself yesterday, figuratively, because I got aggravated at somebody who was taking forever to process what I was explaining. And I thought, wait a minute, that's not fair. He wasn't being deliberately interfering. He wasn't processing what I was saying, and I wasn't processing his answers. So I need to, stop, think, reassess, and then solve the problem. What I did with that was I worded it a different way, and then that made sense. But I'll say to my grandson, if he's starting to get upset, deep breath, deep breath. That's our cue, because that, and he used to hate to do that, but you take a deep breath with him, he goes, oh, all right, and then he does it, and then he gets calmer. This next one, act as their frontal lobe, is something that is just kind of an interesting way to look at it, I think. If they don't have the capacities at their fingertips right then, the strategies to use to calm themselves down, then we can step in and be that monitor for them. I like to think of this also as like the filter, you know, the guy that stands there and says, oop, don't say that, somebody's going to get offended, or, you know, think that to yourself. I'm not going to just blurt out the first thing I thought of because it would come across as rude. So when my grandson is distressed, I can step in and be the one to say, oop, wait a minute, let's do your calming things and then think about it. And that works for him. And it does work that he gets better and better and doesn't need that nearly as much as he used to. Just so you know, if you have little ones that you're doing this all the time, it does get better. Another way to help them figure out an appropriate response is to, when they're not upset, when they're away from whatever that situation is, try it, role play, act it out, try it out in a calm setting or atmosphere. Or write a social story. There's a really good book out called Social Stories, and I'm blanking on the woman's name.
Carol Gray?
Huh?
Carol Gray?
Yes, Carol Gray. I knew Carol, I forgot the Gray. Carol Gray. And it's a way of walking the child through the situation in a safe place, which is away from it in the picture book. And my grandson also liked doing it with cartoon figures, and he would fill in what the people said back and forth to each other. He liked that better than a story. And then helping them build self-awareness. I have a friend who plays detective with her son when he's calm. So he goes back and says, okay, now, we saw this happen, you got upset about this, and then you got mad and stomped off and quit playing with your friends. So let's figure out let's play detective. Why do we think that happened? What do we think happened? And then she backtracks with him, and they play detective. And the putting the tone of play detective on it distances him just a little bit from it, so you're not talking about you, you know, and like finger pointing. He doesn't feel like he's being accused or something, but he's helping figure out the problem because he's putting on his detective hat. He's 8, so that still works for him. No, he's 9. But there are a number of different kinds of strategies, I think, that we can explore to help the person gain a little more self-awareness. This is really important. Every little step along the way, praise. Do a little bit at a time and praise. I really liked the way you stopped, took a deep breath, and then talk to your brother. Organizational skills involve logical sequencing, planning, and time management. That's the biggie that we see. Time management and planning. The ways to deal with that we often hear about picture cues, picture schedules. We talk about that a lot with our kids with autism. Some kids just don't like that. It bothers them. They don't want it out publicly. What we need to really pay attention to nowadays, given this generation technology, there's all kinds of things out there that the kids can use themselves to help get organized, and then they feel more in charge, which is where we want them to be eventually anyhow. We're working right now with my grandson on remembering to set his alarm in the morning. We're getting ready for school, so we're starting that ahead of time. And he still doesn't remember to do it by himself, but it has moved from, my daughter's moved from set your alarm to did you remember to set your alarm, to now it's what do you need to do before you go to bed tonight. So he's starting to internalize those skills, but he still needs that reminder. But as you can see, he's stepping back a little bit each time. There's watches that do all kinds of really cool things. There's tablets. You can always go to the technology person in the school district where you are and ask what kinds of apps do you have? What kinds of technology would help my child?
Joanne?
Yes, ma'am.
IPAT is a great resource to the community, and they have lots of assistive technology that you can go over, no cost. And they'll let you practice. They will loan things out that you can try them. Great organization, IPAT.
Yeah. And if you Google, it's I-PAT,
Yeah.
and it'll pop right up. But this is really the way to go, I think, with the generation of kids we're raising now and young adults. You guys know this stuff inside and out. I have to remind myself to go there. I finally am remembering to put my calendar on my phone because I always have my phone with me, but it's not what I think of first. Denise?
Those people who have kids at Moorhead schools, they use Google a lot. They use Google Docs, they use Google Gmail, they use Google Calendar, which I just recently found out. And so they can access that from anywhere with their school email. And so what we're going to do, I have 2 kids on the spectrum. What we're going to do with my one daughter is, there are several of us that make appointments for her. And we're going to plug the appointments in for her because she has absolutely no time management skills. So we're going to plug those things in for her. She's a 10th grader, but she's going to be taking a college class, so we have to figure out a way to get her to organize those things. So at school, they're going to work on her getting her school stuff in the calendar. So it's not overwhelming at first, but so that she's starting to grasp those concepts so that when she does graduate, she hopefully will be able to have the skill at least to know how to start.
There was 2 important things you mentioned. One was working in partnership with the school so that you're kind of reinforcing each other, and step by step. Little pieces, you know, we just do a little bit at a time. Great, thank you. Kate, did you want to
I
answer?
was just say with that technology, it's nice because we're, starting at 9, we're going to put her picture schedule on her, where I have an old phone and it's not going to be used for only like her things. Right? She'll have her schedule on there, she'll have her music for her calm down time, she'll have reminders on there, and then as she progresses into the bigger grades, she'll be able to start putting her schedule on there and things like that. We're also going to write into her IEP that she's going to be able to text us or FaceTime us if she is having a particularly rough time, so she can see my face and hear my voice and calm down on her own at a different building.
That's a brilliant idea. Actually, my daughter thought of that with my grandson, and it works.
Yeah.
Now, he doesn't do that anymore. The teachers were really nervous about it. His case manager was, oh, he's going to be so dependent, but it worked at the moment. And, you know, that connection with you at home is really powerful. And so that works. How old is your, I mean, what grade is your daughter in?
She'll be in 4th.
4th grade. Okay, so you're starting young
Yeah, because
with
I want,
how to do this organizing.
Well, she teaches me so much technology already. She knows how to type stuff in. She knows how to ask Siri for stuff. She knows all that stuff already. This just takes it another step. And then, like I said, so as she gets to be an adult, and then some of us who did not have these things growing up, I struggle with it, but it'll be second nature to her, and I think that'll be help. Because this is, you know, going to be better than, you know, your big picture schedule, and it's all right there for her. Timers, everything. I'm just going to teacher to use that for
And
advantage.
so starting young is a key as well. Good, thank you. One of the things that we talk about a lot for teaching kids in school is giving one-step directions, gradually adding another step, because processing several steps in a row, it can be really hard for our kids. So at home as well, use simple directions, one step at a time, and fewer words. Somebody taught me when I was a new teacher, when I was teaching 3rd grade, was if you can't say it in 2 sentences, don't bother, because the child's not going to remember it. So I still try to do that. I'm not doing it today, but when you're giving a direction or feedback, try to say it in 2 sentences or less, because that amount can be processed pretty easily. Visual planners, assignment books, checklists, boxing time, which is like on a calendar, just put a box around this time frame. We're going to do this, this, and this in here. Kids aren't always ready for the assignment book yet, but those are things that come in time. Countdowns for we have this amount of time left. The key that I've learned from several sources, including Barb Stanton, but also from my grandson, I asked him yesterday, I said, what's the best way to let you know it's time to finish? When will you be finished? When 5 minutes is up, or when the task is done? He says, oh, when the task is done, because he can't stop in the middle of the game. That's really, really hard. So when we're supervising our Game On event on Monday evenings, I've learned now to say, okay, you have 10 minutes left. Start finding a stopping place. And we talk about a stopping place. And as we get closer and closer, have you come to a stopping place yet? And that makes so much difference for a lot of our kids, because stopping at the time is harder for them. However, knowing it's coming up is helpful. That's hard in school, because, like he's in high school now, and, social studies is over. And I'm not done yet, Well, I love the idea that he wants to finish, but it's just hard. And then modeling is something to think about. You can do this for problem solving as easy as like in the grocery store. Walking down, if you get your kids to go to the grocery store with you, maybe you'll leave them at home because it's too stimulating. But, oh gosh, I want to get that cereal, but I think maybe this one is a better deal. I get more for my money if I buy this one. It's thinking out loud. I'm doing this with my grandson as I'm driving now, because he got his driver's permit this summer. And before he got it, I started thinking out loud about things like, I want to make a left turn, but I'm not quite sure if I have enough space. I'm going to wait till this car goes by. Other people thought I was nuts, but Colin really listened to me, and so he kind of enfolded that into his thinking processes. And again, praise every little step that they make. This is important to know that they're doing the right thing. Transitions involve shifting a task, shifting your mindset, and getting started on something. Sometimes we'll see this in schools too, that kids are lagging around and it looks like they're not paying attention. It's because they haven't finished they haven't shifted from what they were thinking about to the new thing to think about. So in here, think about the completing something by the end of the task rather than time, which I just talked about. A lot of times it helps to take a break physically, particularly if your child likes to move. If you're going to move from one thing at home, like their screen time, and now they need to go get ready to dinner, like maybe their job is to set the table. Well, you might need to get them up and just do some kind of a silly running in place or a dance or something physical that helps shift the mind away from the screen to the next task at hand. This works at schools too, and I've noticed a lot of schools are starting to do active things in the classroom. And there's some real, I think there's probably some brain research that would indicate how that helps shift. Building routines, we're all familiar with having a regular routine that the child can count on, but boy, don't try and change that too quickly, or they'll call you on it. Countdowns help. A starter phrase, if we look back at initiating an activity, sometimes the first thing that pops in my mind is writing, you know, if a writing prompt at school. If you have to get started writing something, start the sentence for the child. And that often can get them over the hump of getting started. Or an initial thing like, okay, Grandma's coming over, so I'm going to, and then say what it is going to, I'm going to put my toys away so that there's room to sit down. Whatever it is, some kind of a clue can be really helpful. Again, the technology helps a lot. Anticipating, reading ahead, social stories, predicting what might happen, and then giving them cues, visual cues. And again, every little step, be sure and say something positive about it. We build these skills slowly and methodically. We think about this more probably than parents of other kids. And if it fails, it's not you who's failed, it's the strategy didn't work. So don't kick yourself or beat yourself up. It's like, oop, didn't read that one right, let me try this. Have you ever come across an incident where something happens and you have to think, oh, that's right, you have autism. I forgot for a minute. And then it's really important to practice when the child is relaxed and they're out of the stressful situation, because that's when they learn the best. These are our contact data. Down at the bottom of the YouTube, John is the person who's very graciously edits our videos and then posts them for us on YouTube. And if there's ever a time when you've missed a topic, or you can't come to one, in a relatively short time after we have this, John will have that posted. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to build a little bit on your building the skills slide. A lot of times people get frustrated when they don't learn the skill right away. But what I've noticed with my kids and what I've noticed with my work is that, you know, you're looking at building a big skill and there might be 1,000 steps to get there. If you're learning to teach them coping skills, for my one daughter, we first had to teach her how to identify what she was feeling, because she couldn't identify what she was feeling. That's where it had to start. And so she learned that first, and you know, she's 15 now. We started this at 8 or 9 years old. She still isn't always able to cope, but she's almost always able to cope. She started with learning what she was feeling. Then we gave her the words to use to express how she was feeling verbally. Then some of the tools that she could use to calm herself down so that she didn't melt down. And then how to repair maybe what happened during a meltdown and make that better. And so people get frustrated, but just know that every little baby step is progress. And it does take a long time to build that.
Well, I think that's a really important point. These are big skills we're talking about. Barb?
Well, and I want to, you've alluded to it a couple of times, and Denise just talked about it too, that executive skills is not just about the kids, it's about us too. That there are times when we as adults may be confronted with challenges as well, and our executive functioning is going to suffer at the time. If we're under stress, age, illness, lots of things are going to also impair our executive functioning too. So I think it's important when we're thinking about kids being able to monitor and learn those skills. It's really important for all of us to be able to identify in ourselves when we might kind of have some of those challenges too, and know when we need to step back. And you talked a little bit about role modeling and things like that, but I think everybody needs to understand that we get challenged too sometimes, and it's just important for us to recognize that and follow a lot of those same suggestions that you have, not just for kids, but for everybody.
And there's nothing wrong with saying to your child, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I say it a lot.
Yeah. I got really mad and I forgot to calm myself down before I talked to you. You know, again, that's mine.
I was just gonna use myself as an example, because this happened to me the other day, where I just got so angry, and there was so much going on around me at the time that I said some things I probably should not have said to my son with autism. And after I calmed down, I went up to him and I said, you know what, Ryan, I'm really sorry I lost it. I lost it, I said some things I shouldn't have said, and I apologize. He goes, well, you know what, Mom? I do that all the time too.
Yes, it helps to put us on that level with them.
Yeah.
When you can say, I messed up, I think it puts us at a place where we're at that same level, and they can see that it's not just who they are, it's everybody gets to that point.
I think that's crucial for professionals working with kids, because our kids are gonna have some sort of natural trust for us as a parent, but as a professional on any capacity working with kids, whether it's a teacher or a social worker or behavior or whatever the case is, they are going to have a lot of respect and be more apt to listen to what it is that you're trying to teach them if they trust you and you're able to acknowledge that, I messed up.
Yeah, we do a lot of mom is sorry. Mom is sorry.
John, do you or Chris have any kind of responses to this conversation we're having?
Don't know what else to really add. I mean, you kind of gave the gamut of responses pretty much in terms of patience.
Yeah.
That's a word you've used a lot, is patience.
Yeah.
I mean, in the past, you've mentioned that before, and maybe I should add that to this, not just the praise, but the patience.
We have this little thing going on, well, and here's the backstory. Emily wanted a fish, a goldfish, Dorothy. Dorothy is Nemo's goldfish from Sesame Street. So we went to the pet store. I was very proud of her. We went and picked out a tank. We picked out the fish. She paid for it. We did all this stuff. And now she wants Nemo. She wants a clownfish. No way we have the money or the talent to take care of saltwater fish. I've explained that to her several times, 3-4 times a day, and that can go into an escalation of a meltdown. I know she knows we can't have Nemo, but when pressures arise and she starts yelling, clownfish, 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 and things like that, what is happening? Because intelligent-wise, she knows she can't have one, but why then 3-4 times a day is what I think is her executive functioning is somewhere failing her, and it kind of kicks back into, I need to have a clownfish. And then I can see her almost ticking the steps down, like, okay, I can't have a clownfish because Mom said this, 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 and then she'll just go, oh, Dorothy, and she'll get back to it. But then that can start up again in 2 hours. Do you have any insight on why that seems to get stuck and why we keep repeating it when we clearly know that it's not happening?
Well, I'll start by immediately answering. Nobody's exactly the most rational state when they're upset.
Yes.
And with those in the autism spectrum, a much more extreme version of that can obviously happen. Like what we all go through, like a lot of times we'll demand the most irrational things when we're upset, when we'll think things that are just not true and whatnot. So, but beyond that, that might also be a very neurological thing associated with your daughter too. I've worked with somebody on the autism spectrum where I think genuinely he is just that neurologically hardwired. He's actually like he's like a 33 version of your daughter, where you tell him one thing, you tell him no, like literally you tell him no,
this is not happening.
no, not happening, but he'll continue to press the issue regardless.
And that's just...
It just might, like I said, so that might be something that you would work with whoever your professionals, whoever your support system in terms of what would be the best approach then. Maybe it's a matter of just hardwiring her to, instead of going for the goldfish, something that's already present within her life. I don't know. I'm not a professional in that aspect.
But even that helps out, just to know that somebody else is hardwired in that respect to not be able to change her tune. And she can, but it still just reverts back like it's still, like we never had that conversation, so.
Like an extreme version of that with the 33-year-old, it's gone to the point where, and I don't like spending time with him, to be honest, but it's gotten to the point where if he does come visit, if he asks like a question, I'll actually write on a Post-it note, you've asked this question.
Ask
My
and
answer is no.
Okay.
Is it almost like a default that she goes back to, like maybe if she's
Yeah,
getting
maybe that's
stressed
what
or
I think
something?
that is.
Yeah, I think about that too, and I try to, and because that was evident a little bit in therapy today, but Nemo, when she's watching it, and it'll just, and she'll come running out, got to get a clownfish, got to get a clownfish, and we gotta go through the whole thing again. And sometimes I fail, and Mom is sorry, because I'm like, you're not getting one!
Could
And
you
then-
substitute something else, like a little video clip of,
No, she has, that's just,
You
she
have that.
has all of her videos, she can Google YouTube faster than I can, she's got them all organized, all her pictures, she takes out the internet organized. So it's just,
What about making a social story about it, that she's not getting one, so she can read it every day? That might be not a bad idea.
I've dealt with the same thing with my son. He gets, this morning it was, I gotta get to school before lunchtime, am I gonna get there before lunchtime? I'm like, it's 8 o'clock in the morning, we're gonna get there before lunch, honey. No, I gotta get there before lunch, I gotta get there before lunch. I'm like, honey, am I gonna get there, am I gonna get there? I'm like, yes, you're gonna get there. Am I gonna get there before lunch, mommy? I gotta get there. I'm like, gonna get there. I mean, honestly, it was at least 50 times before we reached the front door. 10 minutes went by, it was fine. Back in the car, are we gonna get there? I mean, it's just like, that, and I'm like, what's the answer to that question? Yes, we're gonna get there. Are we gonna get there, mommy? I mean, he knows the answer, but he can't stop asking. So it's just, it's that whole stuck in the process, stuck in the mind frame, and it gets really frustrating, and I just am like, okay, how many times do you think you've asked me that at this point? And he's just like, the answer is yes. I'm just like, but
and she gets to that too, she'll be like, Dorothy, but then there's times you can't, and that's just, I think that sometimes some of our fears is I want to be able to make sure I'm responding to her correctly in the way that she wants me to respond to her, and I don't even know if I am, but your answer helped, because there are times I think that you just have to be like, no, and then they're gonna have to go work that out in their own brain, rather than us going, no, 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 because I think that would almost reset them every single time.
You ever sit
And
down
I
and
think-
ask the question back to her?
No.
Or to your son?
Lisa, did you want?
Well, isn't it a little bit of OCD, but thought OCD?
yeah, and I think there's an anxiety piece
Versus
behind that, absolutely.
a pattern of physical OCD, because my son's the same way. We had
Mm-hmm.
ordered a hedgehog yesterday. And now it's coming in 2 days, but every hour he's asking when is it coming, you know.
It's
and
definitely-
It's coming tomorrow, but people ask that every hour.
So it's a stuckness and maybe also a security.
Yes, I think there's definitely an anxiety piece there that we have to work on. I'll take a breath, calm down, and I do whatever I can, because he also has ADHD, so his attention is very easily redirected. I try to, I'm like, oh, let's play a song on the radio. I mean, and so I can oftentimes distract and move on that way, but it's,
Distraction is often helpful, except again, like
Except
you're noting,
sometimes
it'll kind of come
It'll
back.
come back.
yeah, it does.
It's like a sneeze,
Oh.
you can deflect a sneeze, but eventually you're gonna sneeze.
But then next week it might be something different.
Yeah.
Fixate.
Absolutely.
Tracy,
I was
what
just
say?
like, well, my son was reptiles he wanted to get, and I was not gonna have live snakes.
Not gonna happen.
And I don't know, I must have at one point said, when you're 17, I must have one time said that, and every day now it's when I'm 17, but he became fixated on when I'm 17. But in the meantime, I have a lot of ways that he can research this, which is what he's been working on now, is researching. And the piece with the anxiety, he does the same thing. Am I gonna get school on time? Is that light gonna turn red? Is it gonna turn red because it always is a lot of cars there? And what I focused on instead is, let's pretend we are gonna get on time, but let's pretend we're not. What's gonna happen if we're not on time? Because I needed to help him relieve some of that anxiety that if we're late, here's what we can do, and it's gonna be okay. And once he knew it was gonna be okay, it relieved some of the anxiety for him. He just needed to think through, so if it was, what if I missed the bus, and there's all this anxiety about missing the bus, okay, so let's pretend you missed the bus one day. What are you gonna do when you miss the bus? I'm gonna go to the office, I'm gonna call you, you're gonna come get me, okay. So if you miss the bus, are you gonna be okay? Yeah, so. I think that's important, but what worked to get your repetition stop for my daughter was to turn around and ask her, are you gonna get to school before lunch? Yep. And then she'd answer, and then it's almost like she realized that she knew she had the answer in her. And it didn't stop it completely from happening, but it did slow it down.
Yeah, it didn't slow him down for whatever reason, but I think he's only 5. So, I mean, there's a big difference too in your ability to kind of.
And so actually what you're doing is you're setting the groundwork for that. You're setting the foundation that, you know, you'll be able to build on. And as he gains more individual, personal skill, he'll be able to handle that better and better as he gets
May I interject something? I've been just trying to get in here for a while now, but yes, it is very much an anxiety piece. When you're under a lot of stress and your senses are heightened and you feel like your heart is racing a little bit faster, your mind is going to a default. And that happens to me quite a bit. And whatever that default is, if it's a goldfish, if it's a hedgehog, or getting to school on time, that is the #1 thing that your brain will automatically go to when you're under stress. Now, that is something to do with a bit of hardwiring, and that's something that can be changed, and that focus can change at different times. If you can lower the anxiety, then it's a lot easier to get off of that idea. And you know, like with someone else was saying here about I got to get to school on time for lunch. It was for me. I've had that too. All of a sudden, it's like, okay, I'm not really thinking about what the consequences are. All I know is that that's probably bad, and that is all your mind is going to. There is, okay, what is the consequence? You're thinking of worst case scenario. You're thinking, I got to get to school on time. When you say, yes, we're going to get to school on time, that's not really quite getting to the core of the brain, and your mind is still preoccupied on, I got to get to school on time, because you get stuck in a loop. That's what anxiety can cause. Anxiety can cause a mental loop. And for me, when you're stuck in a loop, you got to get something really, really intense. You get your mind else to think on, or something that can just get you out of that loop. Sour candy, extreme sour candy, can just be enough just to break that loop just enough, or to get something else that you can think on that can overpower that other thought.
That makes sense. Very
And
much.
I'm glad you brought up
Yes.
sour candy, because that's one of those little tricks we used a lot when he was younger, and nobody could explain why. Occupational therapists couldn't really explain it. In fact, it went the opposite of what they thought it would do. It would overstimulate, but it actually, and I think, I like your description of a loop. That really kind of resonates with me, that you keep going back and back and back until you break it.
Think of it like a figure 8, the infinity sign. You're just going around and around and around, and the more you're stuck in that loop, the faster you're going, and the more you're in it, the harder it's going to be to get out of it. And that's when you keep on asking, I got to get to school on time, I got to get to school on time, or I need a goldfish, I need a goldfish, I need a goldfish, I need a goldfish. You're stuck in that loop. That's what this is.
So something that's strong enough to make a shift
Right.
is a suggestion. And the reassurance too is important.
Reassurance.
And then, what did you think about the idea of having you say back what, oh yeah, I am going to get there on time, or what,
When they're
the
in
worst,
that loop,
the worst
what you
thing.
say verbally,
Yeah,
you
the
know, I
worst
don't wanna
case-
upset her even more by saying no, because what if that's,
Right.
if no isn't working, and
No
then
isn't working.
it's just agitating myself up, because I've said no 6,000 times, and so I want the appropriate response, and that makes sense, because if I give her a sucker, she's got that oral
Yeah.
stimulation of just calming herself
Yeah.
down.
And then like you said, if you continue to say no and then you're getting agitated, that agitation, I will sense that the
Okay.
faster you're going in that loop.
Okay.
So
But what were you going to say now?
What if you, then somebody suggested, which made sense to me, but it may not fit with what you've described, to say, okay, what would be the worst thing that could happen?
And that is the one thing that I was also going to bring up, is that actually thinking through worst case scenario and trying to do that. Now that, when you have executive function on a lower scale, when you're not thinking straight, you're going to need someone else to help you think about worst case scenario. Because my version of worst case scenario in that loop, of course, is going to be exaggerated. Because my mind will be thinking, okay, worst case scenario is worst case scenario, which is way up here, but in reality, it's probably down here. So I need someone else to kind of think that through, and it needs to be a back and forth conversation. It can't just be this is worst case scenario. Make it conversational to help to engage them into thinking, okay, this can happen, this can happen, this can happen, and then probability of this stuff. What is most likely going to be the worst case scenario? Okay, if you're late to school, what does that mean? In a person who's in that stuck mode, that exaggerated piece may be, I'm going to get expelled. But in reality, it might just be, okay, just a little warning, not let it happen too often. It's not going to be a reason to be expelled, but when you're in that loop, it makes logical sense in my brain that I be expelled because you have that loop, and anxiety is a very big part of that loop. When you're in that loop, your anxiety is higher, your mental capacities are lower.
Well, and the consequence may be, you walk in the office and say, I'm a little bit late, and they'll say, oh, I'm glad you're here. Because I've noticed that our schools don't always appreciate how effective the people at the front desks are for things like that. And that would be something that the child might not even think of. Oh, they'll be glad I'm here, and that then can change it as well. I think you make a really strong point about how that anxiety is what's driving it.
Mm-hmm. The anxiety is driving it. You get stuck in that loop, that causes anxiety. The anxiety exacerbates the loop. It makes the loop more. It makes the loop stronger.
It makes perfect sense to me what you're saying, because at
Exactly.
one point in that loop, he was like, oh man, I'm gonna miss playtime. I'm gonna miss playtime. Are we gonna be late? So that's where it started
Yep.
from, is
Yep.
his fear of missing, his anxiety over missing playtime.
Yep.
Was just one piece of it. So maybe trying to get at what exactly it is you're worried about getting there before lunchtime.
Try to figure out what that cause of that loop was to begin with, because you get in that loop. Loop causes anxiety. The anxiety makes the loop stronger. Your loop gets stronger. That increases your anxiety. I hope I've been able
Thank you.
to add a few.
I think
Yes, that was very helpful.
that's what you bring to us, John, is you're able to explain the hows and the whys, which, to me, that just opens my eyes to looking at it from a different point of view, because that wouldn't be my point of view initially, because that's not been my experience. So we appreciate it, and the same with you, Chris. I mean, that really thinking about it in terms of the heart wiring, you just go to that. That really is helpful. Thank you. Anybody have any other questions? We have about 10 minutes left.
So do other parents, other people find it's helpful to medicate for the anxiety?
We've never touched upon medication yet. It's something that's always in the back of my head. It's the acorn tree method. She doesn't fall far from me, so I also have it. My son has it. She has it. And teaching her, giving her tools in her toolbox that is not a pill box first is more important to me. So she has some of those, and we're gonna deal with medication later. That's my personal choice. I'm not against it. It's just when she can't describe her health in terms of what hurts, what level does it hurt, is it this kind of a hurt, and she has a huge threshold for pain, it's hard for me to give her medicine that might make her feel constipated, uncomfortable, depression, blah, 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 when she can't describe them to me. That's my obstacle to get over right now, that I want to be able to have her give something that will take her down a couple notches and still be able to maintain a health, verbal communication between the two of us.
Yeah.
And that's just hard. But we'll have to see how this year at school goes too, because school right now is looking like an impossibility, stress, anxiety-wise, and probably.
Well, So what has your experience been? You said you do use.
We do, but we have, my son is very low functioning, almost nonverbal. And he has, you know, I hear phone 50 times a day. Phone, 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 phone. You know, how do you, and when he can't find one, his world comes crashing down. You know, but he can't, cognitive-wise, he's 16 and functions like, his 3-year-old brother, you know, is cognitively further along than he is. So it just makes it that much harder. How do you reason with him? How do you, when he's not comprehending, it's just very difficult.
Getting into
And
his
we
world
do-
is hard, yeah.
Yeah, when he is as low functioning as he is, you know, and just fixates and patterns so easily and gets so obsessed with him. OCD like, you know, and he has extreme high anxiety. And yeah, he's been on medication since probably 9. And yeah, we don't know, you know, we just have to watch for behavioral and physical, you know, how long has it been since Sawyer's on? You know, how many, you know, is he constipated, is he, you know, you just have to put on your detective hat and you have to watch every little thing to see, you know, how you think the medication is affecting him, because he cannot tell us. Mom, I have a stomachache. Mom, this pill makes my head hurt, or this makes me dizzy. And you know, he'll never be able to. But that's why I was curious, you know, how many of our kiddos, how many kids on the spectrum have anxiety, and how many of them take something for it to help take the edge off? Mine's more ADHD, he takes it for the ADHD piece. And he's 7 now, but when he was diagnosed he was 5. But his is also behavioral issues, aggressiveness. And he needs it to calm him. So that's why it is concerted that he takes. But it's not ADHD.
It's really a very individual issue to deal with for exactly the reasons you're talking about. It affects different children differently. I know my grandson does take something for anxiety, and it does help him feel calmer. He also takes something for ADHD, but he notices when he's not taking it. But he's older and verbal, and he can tell us that now. But that's really something I think you need to really, like you said, have your own detective hat on and really be in close working relationship with your professional. Laura?
I have a question for Sylvia, because we've been talking a lot about the importance of that continued practice. Do you have any suggestions for incorporating some of those into the IEP?
In regard to what parents?
In regard to the, you know, the executive functioning skills that parents might be working on at home, or different ways to get that in as a goal. Because I know sometimes it comes in under accommodations, which is it something that should be brought up more directly? Well, I'm just curious what your
You know, one thing
suggestions
that
are.
I'm realizing too, the more I'm with parents, is all of you have so much knowledge about your kids. And that really at IEP meetings, we need to hear more about what works for you at home, because we tend to think we are the experts, and we're not. I mean, you know, we're one little part of the child's day, and I think we do need to involve you more. And if you do have ideas, please share them with the team, because they should be written in. I think that's really, really key, and that's how we're all going to find the most success. But so often, as all of you know, when you go into a meeting, you have a block of maybe an hour that you're going to sit there, and you have to get through all these things, and the goal might be the educational goal of whatever the team decides, and you may have very little to say during the meeting. And I think that we just really need to kind of turn that around and make sure that we're getting your input into what works. And yes, then we could write all of that into the accommodations and into the plan.
Yeah, like last fall when we went into our IEP, I wrote the IEP myself. And we walked in and I said, this is it. This is how we're going to do with this. Accommodations for Emily for IEP is she's allowed to wear any hat she chooses, whether it be a cowboy hat, a minion hat, her Blue's Clues ears. Those are her comfort zones. That's what she gets to wear. We also got wrote into her IEP, she's allowed to take a backpack everywhere with her, which to me was important to start writing it in because you're not allowed backpacks, I believe, in middle school or high school, so that's important to write in. All these little things that help her at home where we don't see the big meltdowns because we create that for her.
Because otherwise the school
And-
rule may be no hats.
Yes,
And so then the teachers are struggling with saying, sorry, no hats, we don't wear hats here.
Yeah.
Where really, if she's allowed to wear it, that can make the difference of the success of the day.
And it's going into, I find going into, like one thing I learned from my, actually my son's swim coach at Davies a couple of years ago, she just walked in and just went, this is how it is. It's not, this is how it is, it's just, this is it, guys. This is how I run my swim team. And by walking in with that attitude towards the IEP, I just went, this is how it's gonna be, guys, you know, and this is the way it is. We personally came up against a big wall, but this year hopefully we'll change that with the new teacher, but you need to walk in with all those things that people might think are ridiculous is not ridiculous to Emily whatsoever, and those need to be always written in.
And
Emily does not
part of
have to
it
sit
too
down.
Is I think there are a lot of people out there that just don't understand autism.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you explain these things, they just don't get it.
Yeah.
I mean, they might think that's a behavior, or that might be something else.
Well,
It's just in service.
Teachers are taught, the way I was taught, which is, you know, you have a behavioral, a response to behaviors. And it tends to be more on the punitive side, or this behavior is deliberate, and that kind of thing. And so all of us, every time we sit down and talk with teachers, we have the opportunity to explain this from a different viewpoint, which is like with my grandson, it was, well, he can't just get up and leave the classroom when he gets, you know, say, well, it was too noisy or too upsetting, you know. He's just trying to get out of things. So we were able to stay calm and, you know, say, well, we know this about him. This is what works for him. When he gets overwhelmed, he has to have quiet time away. The other piece about him is he loves learning and he wants to be with his peers. So he'll only stay there long enough to calm down, and then he'll come back on his own. Well, I'm not sure. I said, well, would you be willing to try it for a week and see? And it was sure. And then it was like, that made all the difference in the world. Because he was ready to come back and learn. He's not learning when he's distressed, and nobody else is learning when he's distressed in the classroom. So there are ways to kind of approach that for the people who just haven't had the opportunity to have the in-service training.
It's a twist in thinking too, because special educators are taught in college to look at deficits. It's always the focus of deficits, and we're really not taught to look at strengths. And that's something that I have really changed when I run a meeting, is to say, let's start talking about the strengths of the child today. You typically will say, okay, what are the problem areas? Let's just focus on that. And I think that just brings the whole team down, where we need to look at the strengths of the child to try to work those into the IEP.
And starting from strengths always gives ideas about what might work. You know, my grandson was the only one in his classroom who would play with this one particular child. And the teacher was worried if he left, who would play with this child, who everybody else played with now a little bit because Colin played with. Well, that needed to be said in the IEP meeting. It wasn't. And it was like, we talk about later, but I mean, what a strength that he sought out somebody who needed a friend. We
And I
can
think-
build on that.
And I think too, is your child named Emily?
Yes.
Right? And I think by going in and saying, this is what works for Emily, it was
Yeah.
like you were really helping the team say, you know, hats work. Everybody here, you know, take the hat away, you're gonna have a difficult day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep.
I did exactly what you did, but I met resistance with the proactive strategies that I brought forward. And when you see him start to escalate, you're gonna have to bring him up. You have to put him in the swing. He needs that proprioceptive movement to bring him back down. And to get the team to put that in the IEP, I mean, we had 3 meetings, and I just felt like these are
It's
simple
just such a
things.
thing, guys.
They're
It's just a
small,
little thing.
But, and bringing those things forward, but it's just, I like your idea of, okay, but can we try this for a week? Can we try whatever? Instead of, because I just felt shut down constantly. But to maybe go back to something like, well, can we at least give it a shot for a month and then meet back in a month or whatever?
Well, and look for, in your school district, look for your people who are, I mean, almost all the schools, local school districts have an autism specialist. Your title is autism.
I'm kind of a training coach to
Okay,
help out with
yeah.
teams.
But person can bring a new orientation to the group.
And I don't even think there are a lot of parents that even know that we exist. I mean, it just happens to be at meetings like this that you find out. But it is just an extra person to come on board and just kind of oversee the situation, maybe go and do some observations of your child, and just kind of say, so what isn't working and what's not.
We also kind of adopted at our house that we have traits. We all have traits. We do not have negatives or positives about ourselves. Everybody has traits, and that's how we tend to do things. And a lot of it was with my 12-year-old neurotypical. Is this Ben is very anxious. Ben has a way of thinking of this grandiose story and then making you listen to every single detail where you have already painted that picture and you're done with him talking. And
Sounds like my family.
that's me. Well, obviously, if you're, but that's a good trait. Can it be a deficit? Absolutely. Can it be an asset? Absolutely. He will be a fantastic writer if he can get all those words out into a medium. So we have traits in our house, and then we go into the IEP with her traits. She is anxious. That might serve a purpose at some point. That might be able to alert her to certain stressful situations. It also can be a negative. So it's just a nice thing that we
It's a
adopted in our
shift
house.
in
Nobody's negative in our house,
orientation.
and nobody's really positive. We are all just a bunch of traits.
We've run out of time, and do you have one more, we have one more thing to say before
I just
we
want to
end?
empower parents, because I sat in on a number of different team meetings with the schools, that the team meeting is supposed to be about your child, and if the school is monopolizing all the time to get their details out of the way, you can take control of that and make it about the strengths. Make it about what you think is important for them to know. Make it about what you think is important to be in the IEP. And if you need to schedule another meeting to do that,
Do it.
you had 3, do it. And they'll understand and realize that, oh, this is about my kid. It's not about you as the school and what your needs are.
And
And if
it's-
you need help with it, there are advocacy organizations, bring people in, contact the networks. Joanne's gone to meetings before.
Just the power of numbers. Moms will show up with
If
you.
it's tough for you or you're feeling overwhelmed, find somebody and bring them in.
Please bring people with you.
Yes,
Never go
yes.
alone, please.
Never go
again. Please.
Yes.
I was just gonna make one more comment about the opposite side of that. It's nice that you can go in and they ask you, you know, what helps your child, but it's also hard when you go in and they say, why is he doing this and what can we do different? And I don't know, I'm not at school.
That's just it too, but it's.
So there's
So
the
then
other
you
side.
should be the one that says, why is he doing this?
Well,
And what are you going to do?
Get into the problem solving. Yeah.
I was a special ed teacher, and I went to every teacher. I was in the middle school, and I went to find out about Ryan from every teacher before the meeting, and I had them dictate to me all of Ryan's strengths, all of Ryan's weaknesses, all of his needs, and all of whatever, and I had all of that ready on a chart before the meeting. So we had all of that before the meeting.
That's a good point too, because if my processing time is quite slow. If you throw me something and you expect me to read it and immediately answer about it, it's not gonna happen. So also in IEPs, I request everything shipped to me at
Well,
least
and
5 days
it
before.
is fair to say, you know, I really need it to go this way for a little while. Parents have the right to speak up in the meetings, and it's interesting that they said, you know, why does he do this? You know, and they ask you, and then, but that might be a time to say, well, when he's distressed or ready to melt down, I know this, and this helps him. Maybe that would be one way to get there. But anyway, this is another whole discussion, so thank you everybody for coming.
Thank you very much.